I was on administrative stand-down for 11 days when I found him, which is to say I had time I wasn't supposed to spend on anything official, and spent it on this instead. The frigate Wrentham Sound was holding station at the edge of a patrol corridor we had worked for 6 years, waiting out a resupply window, and somebody had handed me the unindexed backlog from Deep Grid Archive 11 as a make-work project. Decades of junk telemetry nobody had ever sorted, sitting on a band so old half the crew didn't know we still monitored it. The Joint Salvage Telemetry Accord, signed before I was born, between Earth and an empire most of the corridor charts didn't bother naming anymore, to cover decommissioned hardware reporting its own teardown status, so nobody confused a scrapped hull for a missing one. Nobody read the backlog. I read it because I had 11 days and nothing better to do with them. Most of what came down that band was exactly what the Accord promised: corrosion percentages, serial numbers, teardown timestamps in a format 3 generations out of date. Then, 6 days into the audit, there was a burst that wasn't shaped right. Too long, too much structure where structure shouldn't be. I pulled it apart because that is what you do with a wrong-shaped burst, and inside the compression artifact, sitting where a routine pre-decommissioned neural buffer wipe should have left nothing but a string of meaningless zeros, there was a voice. He called himself KL9, 9th iteration of a battle line the Empire had stopped fielding 2 campaigns ago, scheduled for processing at a facility the records listed only as Decommission Annex 7, on a moon I had to look up. The voice wasn't a distress call, it wasn't addressed to anyone. It was a log a soldier records for no one, the kind you make because the alternative is silence, and it should have been wiped clean before it ever touched a transmitter. Some maintenance routine had bundled it with the teardown packet by mistake, the way old systems bundle things when nobody has updated the protocol in 40 years, and it had ridden the packet out through every relay that still answered to the Accord's call sign, including ours. He talked about a dream he kept having. A ship, unmarked, coming in low over the annex yard on a morning he didn't specify, and someone he didn't know walking down the ramp like it was an ordinary errand. No ceremony to it, no urgency. The way a person walks towards something they already expect to be there. He said the dream never went any further than that. No rescue, no fight, no words exchanged, just the ramp coming down and the walking. He said he didn't think it meant anything, that dreaming about being collected was probably the kind of private superstition every unit on his line carried in the last weeks and never admitted to out loud. He said he recorded it anyway because a man scheduled for processing in 9 days starts keeping track of which thoughts are his, and that one felt like it belonged to him more than most. I listened to it 3 times before I did anything with it, and what I did was nothing official, because there was nothing official to do. No one had sent this to me. No one had sent it to anyone. The Accord that carried it existed to report scrap, not souls, and there is no clause in any document I have ever read that obligates Earth to answer a file that was never meant to leave the room it was made in. I filed a discretionary audit request anyway. I told my CO the backlog review had flagged a data integrity anomaly in a decommission packet. True, technically, since a coherent first-person log embedded in a teardown burst is exactly that, an anomaly, and that protocol required physical verification before the unit in question could be processed. That was also true. I had simply never seen anyone use the clause for this. We diverted 3 days off our resupply window. Nobody above me asked why. I made sure of that by not making it easy to ask. The annex turned out to be a low-gray complex laid out around a yard the size of a parade ground, daylight flat and colorless across corrugated processing sheds that had clearly been built to move large numbers of bodies through a small number of doors. There were no markings on any of it meant for outsiders to read, no signage in a language we'd recognize, no flags, nothing performed for an audience, because the place had never expected to have one. A line of units stood at rest in the yard when we came down, watching the frigate the way you'd watch weather you hadn't been warned about. A warden marshal met us on the apron himself, which told me he had no idea what to do with a Terran frigate appearing over his moon, and wanted to be the one standing closest when he found out. His name was Run Castus, and he did not ask me what I wanted before he asked me who had sent for me. I told him the truth, which was that nobody had. He went very still in the way I have learned means a person is doing arithmetic they did not expect to do that day. He pulled his own outgoing logs in front of me without my asking. Every transmission his facility had sent in the last standard month, every one of them addressed exactly where it was supposed to go. None of them addressed to Earth. None of them addressed to anyone but his own chain of command. He read me the list out loud, slower each line, as if saying it again would change what wasn't on it. "There is no record of a request," he said. "There is no record of anything leaving this facility that should have reached you." I told him that was correct. "Then why," he said, "are you here?" I told him about the audit clause. I told him about the anomaly. I did not tell him that I had listened to the recording 3 times, or that I knew the shape of a dream a man has 9 days before his processing date, or that I had spent 4 of my 11 stand-down days deciding I was allowed to act on something nobody had asked me to act on. None of that was in the clause. I kept it out of the report on purpose. He led us into the holding block because the paperwork was strictly in order, and a facility that processes that many units a season runs on paperwork being in order above almost everything else. We found Kale 9 in a row of holding cells with 7 others from his line, all scheduled for the same processing window, all of them watching the door the way men watch a door when they have stopped expecting anything to come through it. I told him I had heard the recording. I watched that land on him slower than I expected. Not relief, not yet. Just the particular stillness of a man recalculating whether the thing he made for no one had somehow been heard by someone. "I didn't send that to be found," he said. "I know," I said. "I found it anyway." The audit clause covered units exhibiting data anomalies pending further study. It did not specify how many units, and it did not specify how long the study could run. I pulled all 8 off the processing schedule under that language, loaded them onto the Rentham sound, and logged the retrieval as standard procedure, because under the words I had chosen, it was. Runcastus stood on the apron and watched 8 units leave a facility built to process thousands, and I do not think he understood, even at the end, what had actually happened. He had no transmission to point to, no request filed, no distress logged, no clause that named Earth at all. Just a frigate that came for 8 men nobody on his moon had called for, and left the rest of the annex running exactly as it had before we arrived. I filed my report calling it a standard audit retrieval and did not elaborate. I did note, in the line reserved for recommendations, that the Joint Salvage Telemetry Accord's monitoring band should remain active for the foreseeable future, given the data integrity risks it had already surfaced once. Nobody asked me what that meant. I am not in a hurry for anyone to. Kale 9 asked me, on the second day out, why I had bothered listening to backlog nobody else read. I told him the truth, which was that I had 11 idle days and a band that was easier to leave open than to close. He said that wasn't an answer. I told him it was the only one I had that was true. The rest of it, that I had sat with his voice in an empty cabin 3 times before I moved, that some part of the decision had been made before I had a clause to justify it, I kept to myself, the way he had kept the dream to himself for 9 days before deciding it was worth recording at all. The band is still open. I check it myself now, off the clock, because that is apparently a thing I do.